Welcome to The World Awaits.
Travel tales to inspire your wanderlust.
I'm Kirstie Bedford, journalist, editor and travel writer.
And I'm Belinda Jackson, author, travel journalist and columnist, and we're your weekly co-hosts.
Welcome back to The World Awaits. How are you all?
Hi everyone.
We have a special little segment this week because Belle and I had the pleasure of spending the weekend away together on the Bellarine Peninsula in Victoria's southwest. And this week we're going to tell you all about the best places to stay, play and wine and dine in this pretty little coastal playground.
Yeah, so the region is probably best known for the beaches and coastline, but it absolutely punches well above its weight in food and wine. So let's start with that, and I'm going to kick off with Tara Restaurant, which is a fabulous restaurant in the ferry terminal. If that sounds kind of weird, this is not just any ferry terminal. It's absolutely beautiful in the little coastal town of Queenscliff, which is where the ferry from Sorrento comes in from the Mornington Peninsula, crosses the bay and arrives on the Bellarine Peninsula. And the views, as you can imagine, are spectacular. When I was leaving there the other day, there were dolphins sailing past. It was absolutely spectacular. Yeah. And the food was absolutely sensational. We had, things like charcuterie plates, but not just any charcuterie plate, because all of the charcuterie is made in the house from the duck prosciutto. And then the bread is from places like Kett Baker, which is everybody knows Kett Baker because it's the sourdough bakery on the peninsula. Local wines, really fabulous rosé I tried from Bellarine Estate. And the setting is just absolutely gorgeous. You would not say go to a ferry terminal and eat really beautiful food in a gorgeous setting. Like, the design is just amazing. It's no surprise that the building itself has won so many design awards. What do you reckon? And the finger lime. Can I just say a special shout out for the finger limes? So you've got that sort of, Indigenous food thing coming into play as well. And they were just, it's like little lime caviar just sprinkled over beautiful, beautiful seafood.
No, it was, the food was really remarkable. And they used a lot of the seagrass as in the presentation, which was incredible. It looked beautiful. I really loved it. And also, don't miss family-owned Jack Rabbit. Jack Rabbit's probably one of the most popular or well-known, sort of renowned winery restaurants in the region.
Yeah.
And it's owned by Lindsay and David Sharp, who also own Uluru Park Estate and Flying Brickside House and Lewis Golf Club. So we met the chef of Jack Rabbit, funny story. His name's Callan. And I'll tell this little story about him.
Go on.
So when Belle and I he came to chat to us, he was saying that we were asking him, how long he'd been away and what his history was. And he was saying that he actually had to take some time off because he was bitten by his pet snake and ended up in ICU. So, and get this, it took years. His recovery took years. So
that's because it wasn't just a pet snake. It was a pet taipan.
Taipan, yeah, it was the taipan. So the taipan snake bit him. He ended up in ICU. Then he ended up with years of recovery, and he still has pet snakes. He didn't even get rid of the pet snake, but he's back in full health now, and he's whipping up a culinary storm at that Jack Rabbit. And his secret, he says, is a blend of Asian and European cuisine, and everything, of course, is local. So, including they use lamb from Uluru Park Estate. And on the wine side, I have to say, the Pinot Noir from Uluru Park Estate was like drinking velvet, and I'm a bit partial to a Pinot Noir, so I was super impressed with that one. Certainly going to hunt out how to get some more because you can't buy it in the local bottle stores in Melbourne, but you can get it delivered. And you can order it online, so it's worth looking up if you love a Pinot Noir. And Lindsay Sharp says it's all vegan, so it's obviously, seriously, was just one of the best Pinot Noirs I've ever had. So it's also, the other great thing about Uluru Park Estate is it's right opposite the Lewis Golf Club. So if you stay there, because they have these amazing, really contemporary-looking accommodation, then you don't have to drive anywhere. You just roll across the road.
Love to roll across the road, but I wasn't rolling anywhere. I was actually swimming. I took off and did a little detour for a dolphin swim, which was going out of Queenscliff, just near the ferry as well. So in the bay, in Port Phillip Bay, there are a couple of different types of dolphins there. And when we took off, like I'd already met a woman who'd been swimming with them, and they have babies at the moment. So we knew that they were there, and I'd seen them as I came across the ferry the day before. So we knew the places were riddled with dolphins, and they're all playing and hunting and stuff. When I got to, so we spotted some dolphins. There were 20 of us on the boat. 10 got in, and you hang on to lines, and the dolphins will choose whether or not to interact with you. And then when the next 10 of us got to go, we didn't. They ran away. So I was like, oh, I know. It was a bit strange, but so that was okay, because actually the thing that I was more interested in doing was swimming with seals, which is just quite mind blowing. We took the boat out to a maritime structure in the bay called Chinaman's Hat, which is really well known, and it's like a small, almost like a band rotunda, if you can think of a band rotunda in the middle of the bay. And then it's got all of these ginormous seals, some of them up to 350 kilos each, just lying there. There were also little babies and stuff like that. They're all boys. This is really interesting because seals tend to have one male and then they each have a harem and stuff like that. There's only so many ladies to go around. So all of these boys, either they were too young, too old, too ugly, had been kicked out of the pack down on Phillip Island, and then they go and hang out at this Chinaman's Hat. They do apparently, some of them, when they get a bit older or a bit more handsome or something, they go back and, they will have a family life. But because there are only boys there, there's no aggression because they're not fighting over the women folk. So they just lie around in this hat, this Chinaman's Hat, sunbathing and rolling in and out of the water. So we were up really close to them. And at one point I was like, are we okay this close? And we had guides in the water with us monitoring everything to make sure that there wasn't any play going on. But I find them really almost dog-like. They're rolling and rumbling and tumbling, and the lines that the boat had behind them, which you could grab onto at any stage. I was the last person on the line. I don't know how that happened. But anyway, they grabbed onto the line as we were pulling ourselves back in. They were playing like a tug of war on the rope, and it was absolutely amazing. That we were so close to them. They would swim underneath, like a couple of meters below us, and then they'd roll their eyes up and look up above at you. And you're just thinking, this is the most disconcerting thing that I've done for a while. And I cannot believe that I have been so many years going down the peninsulas and I've never done this. So the company I did it with, here's a shout out to Murph and all the team at Sea All Dolphin Swims. And I'm going to pop that in the show notes because it's an astonishing wildlife experience that you can have an hour from home. And it just felt, it was incredible. I can't rave about it enough. So,
amazing.
Right, I'm going to stop raving about it.
Yes. No, it sounds incredible, and certainly there's nothing quite like swimming with wildlife. So while Belle was doing that, my little play in the Bellarine Peninsula was I was doing a cycling vine tour. So I was with a company called Cycling Vine Tours, run by Melbourne friends Alison and Libby, and they run cycling tours all over Victoria. In the Bellarine, they take you along the Bellarine Rail Trail, which is really cool because when you're cycling along, you have the Q Train, which is a multi-award-winning restaurant on tracks, which passes right beside you. So the Q Train, if you haven't heard about it, is incredible in itself, and it's very unique to the Bellarine Peninsula. And you can book a little booth, a little 5-star little booth, and sit there and have incredible cuisine and local wines. And so when you're cycling along the Bellarine Rail Trail, it passes along, so you can just wave out to all the winers and diners if you're pedalling along. And Alison and Libby take care of everything for you. So they obviously bring your bikes and provide helmets, and they're also both seasoned cyclists, but don't let that put you off because they will just do whatever pace you want. So they've had families, they said they've had 70-plus-year-olds, who just want to leisurely ride along in the region because you end at a winery. So it's not a race. It's more about soaking up and taking in this beautiful scenery and being able to have some wines at the end of the day. So as well as riding along, you end up at one of these wineries, you have a bite to eat, and then you can just try some of the incredible wine. So the region's most well known for Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. I mean, not surprising given the experience I had with my Pinot Noir, and Shiraz as well.
Delicious. So now where to stay? We stayed at two very different properties. One was McGlashan's. So Russell and Jan McGlashan started planting vines here in the 90s just to sell fruit. But they were talked into entering an award with their Pinot Noir and ended up winning. And that was at a local wine show judged by none other than James Halliday. So, of course, they took off after that. They have since expanded, opened a cellar door, and now they're making gin as well, which is an arm of the business run by their two daughters. And this is what I love about the region. Everything seems to be so, there's so many family-owned wineries and family-owned businesses here when you compare it with other wine areas that I'm not going to name, but, they rather than being conglomerates, then these are like when you go into the cellar doors, you will meet the winemaker. You'll be talking to the winemaker. You'll be talking to the person that might have worked the vintage. And we did that at McGlashan's as well. So one of the gins, actually, which was really interesting, was made by, we were talking to Maddie McGlashan, and she has infused the gin with pandan, which is that Southeast Asian leaf that you'll find. Often you'll find it, when you get those little parcels of rice that have been wrapped up in a green leaf, that's pandan leaf. And it just gives this really, honestly, it just takes you to Vietnam or Malaysia. And it's such an amazing fragrance to have in gin. And you can try little paddles of them and taste your way through them, either trying them straight or mixing them with a bit of tonic. But, and then after you've done that and had something to eat, then you just toddle back to your luxury eco villa, which is on the site. There are just 4 of them. So it's a small operation. And when you open them up, they're almost like an A-frame, and they look straight down at the vines, which, so you really have that connection to the terroir, to the land that you've just been drinking wine at. Yeah. So the second place we stayed at was Lon Retreat and Spa, which is more of a spa retreat, but very unassuming as it's tucked away at the end of a residential street.
Yes, so as you enter Lon, you get this instant feel of calm, and the decor's all calming, neutral tones, and there's a fireplace and these huge sort of floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the beautiful gardens and out into the Bass Strait. And I have to say, I had one of the best massages here that I've ever had. And the suites are stunning. And mine was a stone bath that's fed with mineral water, which was discovered on the property more than 100 years ago. And what's really lovely about this is it was a family home. So it's now run by the 6th generation of the family. And so that mineral water was discovered by the family themselves 100 years ago.
Yeah, and because there are only 7 suites, it has, it's very boutique. It really is a genuine boutique hotel. We also had another incredible experience when we were driving to Tara. Kirstie noticed our driver, Jason Smith, was a Kiwi, and they're chatting about their homeland. Quite a few Kiwis on the Bellarine, can I just say? Shout out to all the Kiwis on the Bellarine Peninsula. And then he dropped in that he was also the chief smoking officer at Bellarine Smokehouse, which is a business that he owns with his wife. So the next thing, we'd arranged a little side trip out to the smokehouse. We're tasting this incredible smoked salmon pate with his wife, Sarah Fenton, who calls herself the fish boss, opposed to the chief smoking officer. And you can either go there for a tasting, or the pate is also on the Q train and many of the restaurants around town. It's divine.
And funny story, but while we were at the smokehouse, we actually met Ebony, who is from the Palawa tribe in northern Tassie. And she's the chef de pate of QT train. And she was picking up some smoked salmon pate, buying some for, to serve on the train. And when I was on the cycling tour, we stopped at one of the platforms, and the QT just happened to be in station, just preparing to depart. And I was like, oh, how amazing it would be if we could have a look on the train. And we were kind of standing around looking at each other because no one really knew how to solve this issue of getting us on board so we could go and have a look. So, and then lo and behold, who should pop out of one of the train doors? But there's Ebony. And I'm like, hey, Ebony, do you remember me? And she's like, of course. I remember you. And the cycling blind tour people were just looking at each other in astonishment. And I said, can we just have a quick look quick look on the train if it's not about to depart. And she was like, no, it departs in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or something. Come on, jump aboard. So we go and board the train, and we walked through and had a really good look at these gorgeous little booths with the white tables and all set up, romantic settings. And then as we just happened to be at that time going through the kitchen, which is in one of the carriages on the train, they were prepping the smoked salmon entree, the exact smoked salmon pate.
That's fantastic.
Right. So, so anyway, that was quite remarkable.
They just don't know, when they see a journalist networking, it still shocks them. So the last stop before we went home was One Day Estate. This was a gorgeous, super quirky property that you can see only on a Sunday, hence the name. It's a winery, but then it's also got, you go in there for lunch and they are so busy. And part of it is not just because they've got these enormous dishes of paella that they serve up to everybody, but the buildings and the furnishings are amazing. So the owners had spent years working in construction and just salvaging things. So there's bits of old churches. The Barwon Bridge holds up part of the bar. I was quite impressed to find Robert Holmes Court's front door was in the
toilet
bar, and I was like, yeah, it's the toilet doors. And that was super funny. And if you go, you've got to try their wild
Pinot Noir.
Yeah, just astonishing. So that was One Day Estate, and we'll put all of that in the show notes because it was so good. Love the Bellarine. Do you love the Bellarine?
Love the Bellarine.
Love it. There you go.
You're listening to The World Awaits. We'd love it if you could leave us a rating and review on your favourite podcast platform.
My guest this week is Matt Cameron-Smith, who heads up Voyages Indigenous Tourism Australia, the Indigenous-owned organisation that operates, amongst other things, the Ayres Rock Resort at Uluru. We're talking about the culture, dining, art and active experiences that you can have nowhere else in the world, only here in Australia. Matt, welcome to The World Awaits. It's so great to have you here.
Belle, our pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, always. Now, today we're going to be talking about Indigenous tourism and its impact on Australia. What was your route into this part of into tourism?
It really stems back to my time with Tourism Australia when we had the experiences portfolio and beginning to understand, I guess, the depth and breadth, but also the beauty and diversity of Indigenous tourism. And I think that if you look at destination marketing, often it's a comparison. It's wider, brighter, bigger, better. But when you get down to, which is the differences, but when you get to what is truly distinctive in a brand and an attribute, I think you're always onto something. And there is arguably nothing more distinctive in our country than our First Nations culture.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because when we one of the biggest challenges for tourism is I believe is globalization, that we don't want to be like everybody else.
That's exactly right. And we do have amazing beaches and we have amazing food and wine. We have amazing attributes in this country, but all of that's a comparison, and you have to fly over a lot of beaches to get here if you're flying long haul. So I think as much as we do have those beautiful natural attributes, when we talk about what is truly distinctive in our country, then I think we're always on a winner.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is the value and the impact of Indigenous tourism on the Australian economy? Because it's not something that traditionally we've, as you say, we've sold Bondi Beach, and we've sold, the Great Ocean Road. How does that impact? How does Indigenous tourism come about?
Well, I think it's growing, actually, Belle. I think that if you look at international markets particularly, and we have seen this also as a phenomenon in domestic tourism, particularly on the back of the pandemic when Australians have really started to discover their own backyard. And Indigenous tourism and Indigenous affairs have been far more topical. But internationally, I think Indigenous tourism has always resonated very highly in terms of the country's appeal, because you look at any country around the world and what you want to do is meet the locals. And Australians are certainly very friendly, very parochial often, but there is nothing more local. There's nothing more beautiful than the country's history, and we have this shared history. through the world's oldest continuing culture that is as diverse as is beautiful, and I think the world wants to know.
So what nationalities are particularly interested? Because I've heard when I've been on the road in Australia so many times, tour operators saying, "Oh, we're full of internationals. We rarely get Australians on here." So who's been the ones traditionally catching on to Indigenous tourism?
Well, I think probably it's the European, it's the Northern Hemisphere predominantly, but I do think that there's a growing interest in Asia because Asian countries have a deep respect of their own culture and cultures around them. And culture is so important. I think that's true globally. Often it was about what does it look like and how do you access Indigenous tourism and what does an export-ready, international-ready Indigenous tourism experience look like. I think a lot of the states and territories have done some excellent work in this space, working with local experiences, educating the operators as to what does it mean to be in international markets and attract international tourists. And I think also Tourism Australia with the Discover Aboriginal Experiences program has actually taken those experiences to the world. And this is where, tourism really is a team sport. And whether you work for an Indigenous tourism business or you are an Indigenous tourism business, working together has far more power than working individually. And I think that when we work as a collective, we're taking our best foot forward. That's when we can start to grow Indigenous tourism nationally.
Well, you are, Voyages operates at Australia's best known icon, Uluru, and it really is an absolute heartland for Indigenous tourism. So can you describe some of the experiences that travellers who are listening will some of the key experiences and your favourite experiences when you are at Ayres Rock Resort, which is operated at Uluru?
Sure. I'll start with, I guess, what it's there to see and do. And it really is the cultural heartland of Australia. It's the traditional lands of the Ununu. Ununu are an incredible, welcoming group. They are steeped in culture. They have been there since time began. And I think if you look at the experiences available, there's many. There's art, there's song, there's dance, there's stories, there's food. If I look at an example of what's been done recently with Wingchiri Wuru, which is the world's largest ongoing storytelling drone show, we worked with the community for 2 years to develop the story. And the story's been around for tens of thousands of years, but we wanted to tell it in a way that was really bringing the beauty of history and culture together with technology, but honour the story the right way. And the community have just been incredible. We worked with 10 senior Ununu in a working group, advising us, guiding us, leading us in terms of how to develop this experience. And we're telling a chapter of the Mala story. The Mala story is a creation story around Uluru itself, and it's the chapter of the story between Docker River or Kapadajar and Mutijulu. And it was incredible for our entire team to be able to sit with these leaders and hear stories that were told to them by their grandparents and their great-grandparents, and then bring it to life in the sky, sort of painting in the sky. And that is a way of connecting culture to tourism in a very new dynamic. Yeah, it's sharing culture in a way that is as spectacular as it is moving. Every voice, every song tone, every image has been drawn and approved and performed by the community themselves. And that's bringing culture to the world.
So would you rate that in your top experiences when you are there?
Well, it's all...
I know, I'm going to make you choose a baby. I'm going to make you choose a child.
You are. I think definitely. I think it's world class. It's been it's world leading in terms of cultural engagement. To work for 2 years to produce a show that goes for 2 hours, the show goes for half an hour. I think it proves that sometimes to speed up, you've got to slow down. And listening and learning about culture is as important as talking about culture. And so it's certainly my favourite now. That's my favourite experience to do. If you ask me my favourite dining experience, it would be different. It would be Tallywood. And Tallywood has celebrated its 10th anniversary. It is a native food-inspired gourmet degustation experience. It's 20 people only on a private sand dune. We've worked with our partners at Penfolds, and we've matched premium Penfolds wines with all of these courses. It's a 5 to 7 course degustation. It's led by our Indigenous team, and it is a truly spectacularly unique dining experience. In fact, it's the only outdoor hatted restaurant in Australia.
That's fantastic. I have dined under the stars on sand dunes in Uluru, and but I arrived by camel, which I thought just made it so.
That's pretty cool too.
I know, right? And the funny thing was that there were 2 of us coming by camel, and the rest were in a group, and they just saw us appear, and they said, "Where did you come from?" We said, "Oh, our camels are just parked our camels in the back." And I thought, at the time, I just thought it was such an incredible experience because you're not arriving in a car, or another couple arrived by helicopter, which was also very dramatic. But this was a slow, quiet walk through the landscape to the table that you're going to be dining at, and the food that is coming from around the landscape. And I actually thought that was one of the most beautiful and successful experiences that I'd had at around Uluru. I mean, I think all of the things that I've really enjoyed have been in silence. Watching sunrise, taking that iconic walk around the base of Uluru, and they do that in silence as well. And I think that contemplation and that appreciation is something that I've taken away from it. I wanted to ask then, but these are really key Indigenous experiences. When you are at Ayres Rock Resort, you see art being produced. You take walks, bush medicine walks, food walks. When you go off country and have Indigenous experiences around Australia, you've talked about the authenticity of creating that experience, and where you went back with the Ananu to create. How can you maintain that? How can you be confident that you've still got an authentic experience when you're going off country?
Sure, Belle. So I think it's really about when an experience is Indigenous led. So when you're hearing about country from people whose country it is, and that can be delivered in many different ways. And I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of other Indigenous tourism experiences, but I know with Voyages, 30% of our team identify as Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander, and so it's your restaurant, it's your kitchen brigade, it's a front office desk, it could be the waiter, it could be the concierge, it could be your tour leader and your tour guide. So it really is about being authentic from start to finish. And for a business like Voyages, it's about employment and education pathways, and the National Indigenous Training Academy, which is in Mossman Gorge and also in Uluru. But nationally, there are some just outstanding tourism experiences that are Indigenous-led or Indigenous-owned. But it could also be down to what are you eating and drinking. It could be the amazing wines produced by Munda Wines out of McLaren Vale. It could be the Beech Tree Gin out of Queensland. It could be Jarraboy Beer out of Yamundi in Queensland. All Indigenous-owned businesses focusing on native ingredients and producing some extraordinary produce. So Indigenous tourism can be more than just walking country. It can be about what you're eating, drinking, and who you talk.
No, absolutely. Look, let's talk about food. And I'm going to share an anecdote because accessing Indigenous food has not always been easy in Australia, which is kind of crazy, considering it's around us. Like how often we have, I think kangaroo is probably the best example. Coming into the supermarkets, it still seems so niche and for the most part available only as a high-end offering. So last year at the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival, I attended an incredible Indigenous degustation experience at Attica, which is one of Australia's top restaurants, and it was a collaboration with Nuraganya and the husband and wife team of Noel and Trish Butler, who were bringing this food in and been working with the kitchen for weeks. I mean, probably months beforehand. So there were some incredible ingredients on there, apart, from bush onion, finger lime, and barramundi and things like that. But also the experiences and how the food was presented and wrapped. But that experience was in the hundreds of dollars, and we did comment on it at the time because it was particularly Noel gave us just an enormous amount of information about it. And we all commented, and he even said as well, this is one of Australia's best restaurants. It's it's peak Melbourne, and it's not affordable and accessible for most Australians. How can we change that, or how do you change that, or where should I go? I mean, you've given me some great examples about breweries and distilleries, but can we get a little more mainstream on it?
Yeah, I think it's growing. I watched a cooking show last time. I did the cooking shows, and watched the chefs using native ingredients in their produce, but very proudly talking about it. And I think it's growing because I guess the culinary arts are discovering the power of native produce, and just how amazing it is seasonally. And seasonally is often the key. First Nations people took what they need, take what they need. They are the leaders in sustainability. They care for country in a way that is world leading. And as chefs discover how to pair these ingredients with, other foods, or how to prepare native ingredients the way that would have been done traditionally, and I think it's a real opportunity that we have to look at our wine industry and to educate sommeliers and chefs and others around how can we contemporize traditional? How can we make it, I think mainstream's a difficult term, but how can we make it more contemporary and showcase the beauty of tradition back in a contemporary way? And there's some restaurants where it is quite affordable and achievable, and a good example would be Mabu Mabu in Melbourne, which is in Federation Square, which really showcases Wurundjeri food and matches with wines, and it's all prepared traditionally. It's like a feed me restaurant. It's a great example of using of an Indigenous chef using native ingredients and pairing it with wines and giving everyone an amazing experience. And I think that's a really good way of showcasing what the country has to offer.
Yeah, it has been an interesting one, and I feel like I'm still waiting for it. We start growing things in our own backyard and then saying, "Oh yeah, I made this with some a pepperberry leaf," or in just having lemon myrtle in our own food, in our own kitchens as well. Because really, that's the end of the goal, isn't it? To stop using harmful introduced species in our food and cooking, and having them in our gardens, and having our gardens being sustainable. Now,
sometimes we've got a yard, but we don't know. It's like a salt bush and things like lemon myrtle and other things, and bush rosemary and ice plants and other elements that you think you've used it, but you don't know why or how.
Yeah, salt bush lamb. Please don't start me on that one. Now, in terms of what new experiences you're seeing in the Indigenous space in Australia, is there any that you're particularly excited? Are there any projects that you can tell us about that you're not going to get in trouble about for sharing with us?
Oh, I think from a Voyages perspective, we're constantly looking to evolve how we deliver. But, I think our focus now will be on how we grow what we're doing now, and how we bring community even closer to the business. And, we're talking now with the community about Indigenous owned and led businesses working in and around Uluru. Could be guiding, could be a range of experiences. But you have some that are there now. Pakshi is a great example. Sammy Wilson's tour run by See It, where Sammy actually guides these tours on his land. It's a great experience to do in and around Uluru. It's run by A to Kings and See It. But it's about everything. It's about, bringing more young Indigenous people through the training academy as almost the incubator of talent for our industry nationally, and ensuring that tourism and hospitality is actually an Indigenous tour. Touring is led by Indigenous people.
Yeah, I think that's really key, because I have been didgeridoo demonstrations done by nice German backpackers working in the space, and you're thinking, okay, is this what I came to see? Yeah. So,
well, Belle, it's an interesting point, and you can go down to Sydney Opera House, and there at the quay there'll be a didge player, and people play didgeridoos in Uluru, but it's not an instrument that's actually from Central Australia. So it's an instrument more for coastal and northern communities. So it's also about understanding that tourists have an expectation because of history as to what they want to see and do, but often the local community would have a different idea.
Do you know, one of my favourite things when I am in places like Uluru is, I think art is that other thing, food being very accessible, but also art as well. And that's something I've actually bought a couple of pieces from when I've been, I really love Central and Western Desert art. There has been some controversy around that, about the authenticity of the art and how it's been created as well, to the point of being major scandals as well. How can we, as consumers, be confident that we know what we're buying is authentically created and created ethically as well? Are we buying ethical art? Is there some sort of benchmark, or is there a website that we use that we can check off these, that we can check that what we're doing is authentic?
Yeah, I think it's about talking to the gallery. And I know with the Gallery of Central Australia at Uluru, when we thought up the concept and when we engaged with art centres, we opened that just over 2 years ago. And it was all about showcasing the beauty and diversity and the distinctive nature of Central Australian desert artists. And we opened with 9 art centres supplying art to that art centre. And it's all about ethical art sales. And ethical art sales means the artist sets the sell price, not the gallery. So the margin is controlled by the artist and the sell price is controlled by the artist. And there are some ICIP protocols around that you can follow that are quite good. But building trust with art galleries is critical. And we now work with 22 art centres from 9 when we first opened 2 years ago. And that's really about building that capability, building the trust with the artists. And that's probably, of 22, there's probably 18 that would never have otherwise seen a tourist. So it helps support culture. It helps sustain culture in terms of sharing culture with the world. But it also helps sustain those artists economically. And that's a really important part of ensuring that this art will live on for generations.
That's a really great point about who sets the price. I hadn't thought of it from that side. I was always thinking about the production of it and the conditions in which these artists work, and that is something that that's very close to you, because you don't want to have that experience as a consumer, that you find out later on in the conditions in which that person had created that artwork that you thought you were doing the right thing about and supporting because you love the work, and then you find that it has this dark history behind it. And I think, but also we can't shirk away from the fact that there is a dark history, and that on tourism experiences, I was down on Flinders Island recently, and that was used basically as an internment camp for the last Tasmanian Aborigines, which was an incredibly dark history that our guides had to relate to us. I just wanted to ask you, are there any international liaisons that you have with other ethnotourism operators around the world? Is there a network that you link into, that Australia links into?
Well, in fact, in a few weeks' time, the Global Indigenous Tourism Conference will be held in Taiwan. It was held in Perth more recently. So there is a global Indigenous tourism collective. And there's some great examples globally also. I mean, I mentioned the amazing work Tourism Australia are doing with Discover Aboriginal Experiences, but if you look at Maori tourism, where they're arguably more advanced in terms of working together, the Maori Tourism Organisation works primarily on capability building within experiences. So it's all about export market ready, being a great business as well as being a great experience. Canada has a National Indigenous Tourism Authority. So there are some great examples around the world, and I think that Australia, thus we're growing. We have so much more to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Matt, I've got one last question for you before you rush away, and that is the question that we ask all our guests, which is, what is your most bizarre travel experience? So I'm sure you have many in the many hats and the many years you've been working in the space. Go on, hit me.
So, most bizarre, it would probably be around discovering what you're eating you didn't know you're eating. Beetles and spiders in Asia that you thought were just a bit of crunch in your salad. That's always a nice surprise. One of the things I found interesting is bringing it back closer to home is maku, or witchy grub, which is a much maligned food for some, but a very important source of protein for others. And the difference between having it raw or cooked. So raw is a bit texturally confronting, but cooked is very peanutty and quite lovely. So it's if you close your eyes, you don't know what you're doing. So I think it's more having the courage to try something new. And so locally, I say it's the difference between cooked and uncooked, which you got. And globally, it's the fact that, food sources are food sources for some cultures. And you got to lean in a little bit and open your mind a bit and be open to new experiences, and you might surprise yourself.
That is a great comment. I have never eaten a raw witchetty grub, but if I was pushed to describe a cooked one, it's kind of like a custardy peanut butter with that.
Yes, yeah. I'm a fan of peanut butter, so that works for me.
All right. Well, on that delicious note, I think everybody needs to go out and try witchetty grubs.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. It's so great to have you with us on the podcast today.
My absolute pleasure, Belle. Thank you.
That was Matt Cameron-Smith joining me from Voyages, the Indigenous-owned corporation that operates the Ayres Rock Resort at Uluru and Mossman Gorge in far north Queensland, and we were talking about why we should treasure our Indigenous tourism experiences. With ANZAC Day just around the corner, our tip this week is about retracing history through some of the significant Commonwealth War memorial sites around the world. So how can you find out where to visit these sites?
So there's a great site called the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, which was founded in 1917, and it works with the governments of the Commonwealth to commemorate the 1.7 million men and women from the Commonwealth who lost their lives in the two world wars. And it has cemeteries, memorials, graves, landscapes and records listed in 23,000 locations and more than 150 countries and territories.
What I found incredible is that every year remains are discovered, identified and reburied with honour. So the organisation's education programs ensure the stories of the fallen are told to all generations. I've been to two of the sites listed, where you can, two of the ANZAC sites listed, which you can visit, including Lone Pine in Gelibolu or Gallipoli in Western Turkey, which is possibly the most famous of sites at the moment, particularly around Anzac Day. And also El Alamein, which is on the northwestern coastline of Egypt, which was the North African front during World War II. While I was there, I did happen to be strolling through the graves and spotted Prince Andrew. No, it wasn't. It was Prince Edward. Prince Edward.
Close enough.
I know. Yeah, I know. He had a big hat on.
Well, it's not really, actually. But yes.
And lots of scrambled egg on his shoulders, So he was walking through there as well. When you go onto these sites, which are beautifully maintained, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission does an incredible job honouring the war dead. You can go back through and look at who's buried there. And I had a great uncle who was actually buried there, so I could go and visit him. I know, and I told my family back in Tasmania, it was on the other side, and they're really touched. People are touched, and that one in El Alamein is maintained by local Egyptians who just have such beautiful respect for this tradition and for the respect that people show toward a war. As they always said in Turkey, our sons are now your sons are now our sons because they're buried in our soil. So, that was Ataturk's most famous quote around Gallipoli, and I think it's a really interesting way if you are not doing something on Anzac Day or in any other day, check out the website.
And while it's too late to visit this year, unless of course you happen to find yourself in one of those parts listening to our podcast, which would be incredible. The website is a great resource should you find yourself in any of the parts next Anzac Day. And for the full list, go to cwgc.org.
You're listening to The World Awaits. We'd love it if you could leave us a rating and review on your favourite podcast platform.
Next week, I talk to author, travel journalist and co-founder of slow and sustainable travel platform Life Unhurried, Celeste Mitchell, about why we're all looking to travel more slowly, what it means for your travelling experience and where you can go to do it.
And if you would like to help support our production costs, you can buy us a coffee at coffee.com. That's ko-fi.com/The World Awaits, so we can continue to bring you inspirational travel interviews with the world's best.
That's a wrap for The World Awaits this week. Click to subscribe anywhere you listen to your favourite pods. And where can people find you, Kirstie?
I'm at Kirstie Writes on Instagram. That's Kirstie Writes, WRITES. And where can people find you, Belle?
You can find me at globalsalsa.com or on Insta at global_salsa.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.